Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we sift through stacks of sources, could be ancient texts, could be today's news, and pull out those really profound, sometimes surprising insights for you. Basically, we want to give you that shortcut to being genuinely well-informed. Today, we're diving into some really compelling material. It points towards what our sources are calling a prophetic sequence of authority, covenant, and judgment.
Yeah.
So it's pretty deep, right?
Yeah.
It's fascinating how it connects ancient ideas to what's happening right now. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, what's really striking here is how the sources frame this whole appeal to Caesar idea. It's not just about that one moment with the Apostle Paul. They're suggesting it's actually a kind of unified prophetic sequence. Think of it like a divine logic maybe, a blueprint that keeps unfolding through history. It maps out this trajectory, from a really foundational choice all the way to a final global kind of judgment. And it's not just history, it's presented as a lens for understanding today.
Okay, a sequence, a blueprint. So
Yeah.
where does it start? What's the first domino to fall in this chain?
It kicks off with what seems like a simple choice, but it has huge consequences: choosing worldly authority. The sources point way back to ancient Israel, Deuteronomy 17.1 thing, I think, where the people basically say, we want a king like all the other nations. That decision, leaning on human systems instead of, purely divine guidance, that sets things in motion.
And that leads to trouble, I assume.
Pretty much inevitably, yeah. It often leads to pride, conflict. There's that image in 2 Kings 14.9, the thistle, thinking it can challenge the cedar.
Oh, right, and it gets trampled by wild beasts.
Exactly. A really vivid picture of how these power struggles play out when you rely on earthly strength alone.
And this failure isn't just political, right? You mentioned it touches spiritual leadership, too.
Absolutely. The sources show this pattern hitting religious authority as well. Mark 5.22 gives us Jairus. He's a big deal, a ruler of the synagogue. But he finds himself humbling himself, falling at Jesus' feet. So you see this humbling of human institutions, both political and religious.
Okay, so systems start failing, leaders are humbled. What happens next in this sequence?
Well, that forces a kind of critical choice, a covenantal choice. Some sources call it a great sorting of destinies, Think about Ruth. You have Orpah, who goes back to her people, her old ways. But then Ruth, she makes that declaration, she cleaves to the covenant. It's a radical commitment. Ruth 1.14 and 1.16, I believe.
A sorting.
Yeah.
Choosing a path. So after all these failures and choices, where does the sequence ultimately lead? What's the climax?
That brings us to the climactic invocation, as the sources put it. It's Paul's appeal to Caesar in Acts 25.11. It represents that moment, that final recourse maybe, turning to the absolute highest secular power when the religious and local justice systems have failed him.
A last resort to earthly power.
Kind of. And the flip side, for those who reject that covenant path entirely, the outcome described is desolation, like Jerusalem in Lamentations 2.15. Once the crown of joy, now a ruin. A really stark image.
Wow. Okay, so that's the core sequence. But you mentioned there are other ways to look at this, lenses, you call them.
Right. 2 additional perspectives that really add depth. First, there's what the sources term the Enochian lens.
Enochian, from the Book of Enoch and similar texts.
Exactly. Those ancient apocalyptic writings, they provide this cosmic framework. The idea is that all earthly kings, all systems of power, they're ultimately accountable. They face a final, inescapable judgment by this divine figure, the Son of Man, on his throne of glory. So Paul's appeal to the Roman Caesar. Through this lens, it kind of foreshadows humanity's ultimate reckoning before the true higher king.
Okay, so a cosmic judgment layer. And the second lens, the Payne synthesis, what's that about?
That comes from the work of J. Barton Payne. He argued that these prophetic themes aren't just isolated predictions scattered across texts. He saw them as a unified prophetic subject, meaning they have real, literal, historical fulfillments, things that actually happen.
Right.
But those historical events also serve as types, like patterns or previews for a much larger eschatological culmination way down the road.
So something can be historically real and symbolic of the future?
Precisely. For Payne, even the tribulation wasn't just one future event. It's the church's ongoing suffering throughout history, just intensifying at key moments.
Okay, this is a lot to take in. We've got the sequence, the cosmic lens, the historical types lens. So how does this ancient blueprint actually map onto the world today? Let's talk about those June 29, 2025 news headlines.
Yeah, this is where it gets pretty striking. You look at that hypothetical news, the U.S. president arbitrating the 12-day war between Israel and Iran. stepping in when regional religious powers couldn't stop the conflict. That looks an awful lot like a global Caesar figure, that single ultimate secular arbiter.
The final appeal on a global scale. And what about things happening within a country, like those U.S. Supreme Court rulings mentioned?
That fits too, but maybe in a different way.
Yeah.
Think about rulings on, say, executive orders about birthright citizenship or parental opt-outs for certain school materials. Amidst deep societal division, you see this strong desire, this almost desperate search for a decisive authority, the king figure, you might say, to lay down the law, to define core values. It's society appealing to its own highest power for order.
A cry for order from the top.
Yeah.
And the other themes, humbling institutions, desolation.
Starkly visible. Japan's final H-2A rocket launched the end of an era. Hong Kong's League of Social Democrats disbanding, another structure passing away. And most tragically, Gaza described as lying in ruins. A literal, desolate city. It echoes Lamentations almost directly. It feels like more than just news headlines. It feels like an intensification of these ancient patterns.
It really does paint a coherent picture across, millennia. History unfolding with this underlying, almost divine logic.
Yeah.
Seeing current events through this lens, it's genuinely striking. It changes how you might read the news.
It does, and maybe the thought to leave with is this. If we accept this trajectory, this path, from ancient choices about authority to these very modern, very real manifestations, what fundamental choices about authority, about allegiance, is your society making right now? And maybe more pointedly, what choices are you being compelled to make in this unfolding drama?
That's a heavy question. Definitely something to mull over. We encourage you to continue your own deep dive into these connections.